Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's the CD guy, Johnny Z here. Thank you so much for tuning back into the channel, and today I'm going to be counting down the top 10 greatest hair metal bands of the 80s. But before we get started here, I guess I should say that I won't be including a handful of bands here that, I feel were unfairly lumped in with the hair metal group at the time, and, those bands, maybe, their music was a bit heavier for the hair metal side. It really didn't fit into the hair metal criteria. So, even though some people might consider bands like Twisted Sister, Wasp, GNR, and Skid Row to be hair metal, I feel like they were wrongfully lumped into that category, and their music is much heavier than the hair metal genre would suggest. So for me, I'm not going to be including those bands on this list, even though I do love all those groups. I just feel like they're not real hair metal groups, just kind of, came up right around the same time and were kind of lumped in together with bands I'm going to be mentioning here on this list. Kicking off the list here with my number 10, I gotta go with Poison, and now, I know a lot of people would probably have Poison a lot higher on their list, but to be completely honest here, I'm really not the biggest Poison fan. I feel like there are a lot of better hair bands from that era that didn't achieve the same level of popularity, but I also feel like I'd be remiss not to include them here on this list just for the sheer impact alone that they had on the hair and glam metal scene in the late 80s, and they really did achieve massive commercial success, like I said, in the late 80s into the early 90s, and have definitely become synonymous with the anthemic rockers and power ballads of the late 80s, as well as the colorful bombastic music videos and appearance on the MTV era as well. So for me, even though I'm not a huge Poison fan, I feel like I have to include them here in some capacity. So kicking off the list with my number 10, I'm going to go with Poison. For number 9, I'm going to go with Slaughter, founded by former Vinnie Vincent Invasion members Mark Slaughter and Dana Strum. Slaughter was, one of those bands whose success was stifled by the rise of grunge and alternative in the early 90s, but initially they rose to prominence with their first two albums with, some catchy melodies and killer vocals by vocalist Mark Slaughter, and they're a band that I think definitely could have achieved a lot more had, grunge not, come up and really steamrolled everybody, but I think they're a prime example of the damage that grunge and alternative did to a lot of the hair metal scene in the early 90s, but nevertheless, during their prime and the peak of their success, they did some great work and definitely belong on this list in my opinion. So that said, coming in at number 9, I gotta go with Slaughter. Another wickedly underrated hair metal band has got to be Faster Pussycat, my number 8 here on the list. Once again, another band whose growth and popularity was stopped by the sudden rise of grunge, but, they definitely did reach their commercial peak with the release of their gold record, this one right here, Wake Me When It's Over. Fantastic album, in my opinion, just from top to bottom here, great stuff, and they definitely represented, some more of the sleazier, trashy side of the hair metal movement, but did some great work in a short period of time, as far as I'm concerned, before fading out of the limelight. So, that said, for my number 8, I have to go with another underrated group in Faster Pussycat. Following that up here with my number 7, we have LA Guns, a very solid band from the infamous Sunset Strip that have a pretty strong catalog despite going through a number of lineup changes over the years, numerous in fact, but even in 2023 they still have a lot left to offer as far as I'm concerned. They released their most recent album back in April called Black Diamonds, very strong stuff, and showed that even though they're past their prime now, still delivering in the studio. So for that, I commend LA Guns. Still around, still kicking in 2023, but in their prime, definitely one of the best bands of the hair metal movement from the the mid 80s. So great stuff from LA Guns, my number 7 here on the list. For number 6, let's go with Ratt, fronted by Stephen Pearcy. Ratt definitely did help to pioneer hair metal from the Sunset Strip throughout the 80s, and they definitely have some essential hair metal records in their catalog, like this one right here, Out of the Cellar, as well as Invasion of Your Privacy. And over the past 20 years, it's been a pretty tumultuous time for Ratt, right, with legal issues, and I believe there were 2 Ratts existing at the same time at one point, but nonetheless, Ratt have definitely made their mark on hair metal in a very big way, and when they were in their prime, they were at the top of their commercial success. They did some great work in the studio, and I find Stephen Pearson to be one of the best frontmen of the 80s in terms of from the hair metal scene, did a lot of great work. So for me, I enjoy Ratt. I think they're a lot of fun to listen to, and even though now they're way past their prime, Stephen Pearcy is still touring to this day, and even though it's not great anymore, you do have to commend him for still giving the fans a real show. So at least there's that, and for me, I really do enjoy Ratt. Like I said, a really fun band to listen to, my number 6 on the list. Breaking into the top 5 here with Def Leppard, another group that I'd be remiss not to include on this countdown. Def Leppard started out as a new wave of British heavy metal band before adopting a more commercial glam metal sound for the release of Pyromania in 1983, and then of course following that up in 1987 with the monstrous Hysteria, right? Just a major album for them, an absolute hair metal essential. But for me personally, I'm more of a fan of their earlier stuff, right, when they were more of a traditional heavy metal act, but nevertheless have to include Def Leppard on this list. list just because they became one of the faces in the mid to late 80s of glam metal and were super prominent during glam's MTV era. So I can't not, put Def Leppard on a list of some of the best hair metal bands of all time. So for me, even though I'm more partial to the earlier stuff they did, I still have to include them here at number 5. Kicking us off in the top 5, gotta go with Def Leppard. My pick for number 4, Whitesnake, are another band who would go on to adopt a more glam metal sound over the years. Fronted by David Coverdale, Whitesnake rose to prominence with the release of Whitesnake 87, this album right here, which I can honestly say is a perfect record from top to bottom, and in the running for my favorite hair metal album of all time. I mean, just an incredible record that really did establish Whitesnake as one of the premier commercial acts in hair and glam metal upon its release in 1987, and, throughout their careers, Whitesnake have shown a lot of range, but they did some of their best and career-defining work with the rise of glam metal, so for that reason, have to include them here on the list at number 4. Gotta go with Whitesnake, absolute legends, and by the way, should totally be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame by now. Top 3 now for my number 3. Let's go with Motley Crue. Let's get this one over with. I have a love-hate relationship with Motley Crue. I really am more partial to their earlier stuff, and then post-Dr. Feelgood is really where they lose me. I'm not a fan of the Karabi stuff, hate Generation Swine, and not a fan of anything they've done ever since. Of course, now a lot of drama with Mick Mars leaving the band, a lot of accusations going around. Of course, it's pretty transparent. The band is, using backing tracks and tapes, things of that nature. So I don't condone any of that. But when it comes to the earlier work of Motley Crue, they definitely did help to personify glam and hair metal. And so for that reason, they have to be on this list with some classic releases in their catalog. Their earlier stuff is very, very strong and is kind of the only stuff in the Motley Crue catalog that I find myself going back to. So for that reason, I have them here on the top 3. Got to go with Motley Crue. One more thing, please don't burn your Motley Crue tickets. That's really ridiculous. You want to stand with Mick Mars or whatever, that's fine, but, the band could care less what you do with the tickets once you've bought them. They've already got your money, so if you really want to stand up to Motley Crue, just don't purchase tickets in the first place. At number 2, let's go with Cinderella, another band that I really enjoy listening to, just a lot of fun to listen to, a great band with a very unfortunate name. They did some awesome work in the mid to late 80s before being steamrolled in the 90s by grunge and alternative, what else is new, but the 90s happened and kind of wiped out a lot of these bands. Nevertheless, I think Cinderella have some fantastic records in their catalog, like Night Songs, Long Cold Winter as well, which is just another one of those perfect hair metal albums, but their debut is stellar too, right? Got songs that feel like Night Songs, Shake Me, Nobody's Fool, Nothing for Nothing, right? Somebody Save Me, just some absolute essential tracks in here when it comes to some of the best from hair and glam metal, so for me, I had to put them in the top 3. Coming in at number 2, I have to go with Cinderella, but before I get to my number 1, I do have a handful of honorable mentions here that I want to give a shout out to, including Kix, Warrant, Vinnie Vincent Invasion, White Lion, and Winger. All really solid hair metal acts, but I can only fit 10 on the list here today. And finally, coming in at number 1, in my opinion, the best hair metal band of all time has got to be Dokken. Just an incredible group. Prime Dokken in the, the mid-80s, in my opinion, were pretty untouchable in terms of the hair metal genre. Did some incredible work with, of course, Don Dokken on lead vocals. In his prime was a fantastic vocalist. Not so much anymore, but this list is focusing on the prime years of hair metal. So Don Dokken, back when he was still able to belt it out, was a fantastic vocalist. And of course, George Lynch, one of the best shredders of all time, and really was leagues above a lot of his competition in terms of hair metal. One of the best hair metal guitarists, period. One of the best guitarists of all time, let's be honest, is George Lynch. So I think he did a lot of work, great work with Dokken as well. So for me, there could really be only one here, and that's Dokken. Great band, released so many great songs across a handful of very strong records, and we're a fantastic live band as well, right? Beast from the East is one of the best metal live albums of all time, in my opinion. So for me, they could only be my number 1 pick here on the list. Have to go with Dokken. So that wraps up this list, counting down the top 10 greatest hair metal bands from the 80s, which should be visible right over here. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel down below, turn on the bell for notifications so you never miss a new upload, and let me know down in the comment section below. I want to hear from you. What are some of your favorite hair metal bands of all time? Let me know all that good stuff down in the comments. And until next time, it's the CD guy, Johnny Z, signing off. Take care, everybody.